Some big upsets in week 8 of the NFL. And if you are with me this week, you're probably pretty happy about it. I am Statsational for the Sharp app. This is Scratchin and Surviving, the #1 show on the entire internet when it comes to survivor pools and survivor pool analysis. All right, let's talk about last week here for a second. We had about 50% of people knocked out in Circa, probably something similar in your pool. Atlanta goes down, terrible game for them. Cincinnati, big comeback by the Jets, and they go down. Two of the larger picks, I think 33% and 18% respectively over in Circa, were knocked out on those two picks. So we had the big favorite with Indianapolis over Tennessee. They kind of cruised in there and was not much of a game. I got lucky myself. I have 3 entries left in my buddy's pool. My 2 entries in DraftKings were easy. Those were both on the Colts last week, but I didn't have that ability in my pool. I had only one opportunity to take the Colts. I had one opportunity to take Kansas City, and the third entry was kind of up in the air. I went with Cincinnati, and last minute changed it to Philly. Now, why did I make that change? So just give you some of the mindset here. I always tell you guys, look, I do these videos on Wednesday. By the time Sunday morning rolls around, we could drastically see changes or see drastic changes in the lines. And even if it's not drastic, just a slight movement, a point or two in the line movement can really dictate which way I'm going to go with my pick. So I always tell you guys, be up to date on the line movements. We started to see money come in on the Jets. That line came down, and I did not want to be on the Cincinnati pick with a lot of other people. I knew they were going to be a fairly popular pick, and I just did not want to be on a pick that now had less chance of winning and still have a great number of people on it. You also had in that Atlanta game, the line really didn't move much at all. So if you liked Atlanta going in, just because Cousins was playing, didn't really mean much. The London news late, where Drake London wasn't playing, didn't move the line all that much, but it may have scared you off, and hopefully it did. But it really didn't move the line much at all. And I know you're going to say, well, obviously it made a huge difference. They played terribly, without a doubt. But you've got to go with what the line movement is telling you. Now, the line movement is not always going to be correct. And obviously it meant a lot more to Atlanta, maybe not having Penix in there, not having Drake London in there, than maybe the line would indicate. But I'm going to, as I always preach on here, I'm going to kind of strict and stay true to the line movement and the lines, because ultimately over time, they're going to be the best determinant of the probabilities of a team winning their game. So I was able to get lucky there. I got off the Cincinnati game. Now, why did I go to Philly and not Atlanta or one of these other teams? Philly, at that point, there was 150 people in that pool left to start the week. Moving to a team in Philly where I knew not a lot of people were going to take them, I don't want to take a team. We had that situation last week where we had a few teams, Kansas City being one of them. Why did I want to take Kansas City? Because I knew not that many people would be on them, and they're a double-digit favorite. High likelihood that they win that game. All right. Yes, I'm giving up a little bit of future value, but I'd rather just get myself in situations as these pools get smaller and smaller. We want to try to get ourselves in situations where we can get a team that is as good, if not even better sometimes, as far as win probability, yet there's less people on that pick, right? I didn't want to take a chance on an Atlanta where you've got 25 to 30%, and in Circa wound up being 33% of people on that pick, when I've got teams that are of a similar line, and Philadelphia just about the same, if not was a little bit more likely to win based on the win probability. I'd rather get on that because of something like what happened last week in Atlanta loss. I've now picked up a ton of equity. Do I give up something in the future? I do, but that's the determinant that you're going to have to make. I'd rather be on the side of a team that's just not as popular, take the team with a similar win probability, and then be able to hopefully advance. And you get the chaos, you get the loss with the other team. That puts me in a much better situation. And then I'll worry about the future if I'm kind of handcuffing myself by taking a team like Philly. I'll worry about that when it comes, because as you guys know, the further in the future we get and look, you just never know where the injuries are going to come from. You don't know which teams that maybe we're projecting to be a big favorite now will not be because of an injury. You see that with Lamar Jackson, right? So Lamar, a late scratch in that game this weekend as well. You see a big move in the line. They, of course, win the game anyway. But these are the things that you're going to have to monitor as we get deeper into the season. A lot more of these situations will arise. Let's jump right into Survivor Grid here first. Actually, let's look at the spreadsheet first, and then we'll jump over to a Survivor Grid. So this is my spreadsheet for those of you who have been with the show for a while. You know all about this. We've got win probabilities. I'll hide this one. This is just where I put in. I'll show you. I just put in the line. It's an absolute value of the line. So this would really be negative 1038. We could say minus 1038 in the betting world, right? And 697 to the plus. So if you wanted to bet the Rams at this particular book, and this is Pinnacle, and I get these lines off the Sharp app. If I didn't mention the Sharp app, use code SURVIVE and you will get a big discount on the Sharp app. Check that out. We've got an arbitrage tool in there. If you want to start making your money back on all these pools, we've got an arbitrage tool which basically allows you to bet both sides of a bet. You need multiple sports books to do this, but sometimes the prices are off between books, and you can cash in on a middle or on an arbitrage where you get maybe you'd have one side of a bet might be plus 110, and the opposite side of that bet at a different book is also plus 110. You can bet both sides and guarantee yourself a profit. So I don't want to get too deep into that, but check that out at sharp.app. All right. So that's all I do here. And then I just take the midpoint. These are based on the Pinnacle lines. Why Pinnacle? Pinnacle's considered one of the sharpest sports books out there. So use their line. But really, any sports book is going to get you something comparable to this. And I just like to take the midpoint. It's not exactly what we call devigging a line, and that is taking the vig. The vig is what the sports book, that's kind of their commission, right? So they're taking a vig or a commission on each one of your bets. That's why it makes it even more difficult when you're betting to win when you are sports betting, because you've got to not only pick the games right, but you've got to pick them right at a rate that beats the vig, right? That's the house edge. So we kind of take that vig out because the vig is not true to what the probability is in the market of a team winning. The vigless line or devig line is the true probability, or at least at this moment in time, right? And we want to look right up to closing. We call it the closing line. We want to look right up to the close. That's going to be the most accurate line. And maybe I'll get more into how lines move. I know there's a big misnomer out there that the sportsbooks are trying to get 50-50, half the bets on one side of a game, half the bets on the other side of the game. That's not exactly true. You, as the average Joe, doesn't really affect the line at all. The sportsbook could care less or couldn't care less about who you are taking as an average bettor. They don't really care. You have no edge. You're basically coin flipping, and they will take the bet regardless, right? They're not going to move, but there are sharp books or sharp accounts out there that they are aware of. And the legal sports books in the U.S. really don't get much into, they don't want to take sharp money, right? So there are sports bettors out there like myself who just really can't play for any size on the legal sports books in the United States because they won't take those bets. They're just not interested in booking them. You've got offshore books like Pinnacle, Bet Online. You've got Circa in Vegas that are considered sharp because they will take sharp action. And the reason they do it is because the sharp money can help them better price their line. So if a sharp account of the sharp bettor and they have these flagged in their system, they know who the sharp money is. If a sharp money comes in on one side of the game or the other, they're more apt to be able to move the line than the public. So you'll see these things on Twitter. Well, 80% of the public is on such and such a game, yet the line didn't move, or the line moved the opposite way. They call it a reverse line movement. Totally meaningless. And I know I'll get comments down below. Reverse line movement is a real thing. It's not. What really matters is who's betting the game, and are they as sharp or are they not? They're the ones who are going to dictate. And what happens in the U.S. is the books like DraftKings and FanDuel and BetMGM, they just kind of move with the sharp books. They're looking at where the sharp money is. They're not willing to take the risk on booking sharp money bets, but they still want that information. That information is valuable. So they'll look at sharp books and see where they're moving their prices and adjust accordingly. So I said I wasn't going to get into it. I got into it. But Any questions, of course, ask me down below. We see this week we've got at 0%, the highest favorite here is the Rams. Big favorite at home against New Orleans. Green Bay, the second choice. They are home against Carolina. Obviously, a couple of games that look like they are favorable here. You know, who knows with Green Bay? They've been playing, they've played a couple of teams. They cost people early in the year on that Cleveland game. So we'll see. You don't know which Green Bay team's going to show up, but the Rams with New Orleans, slightly larger favorite than we're getting with Green Bay. Now, the other popular pick, these are the three popular picks. It's an odd week. There's really most of the picks or most of the pick percentages and entries will be on these three teams, the Chargers being the third. And we'll get into why we're seeing the Rams so high and the Chargers about half of that at 25% in a second when we head over to survivorgrid.com. But Chargers at Tennessee, they've got about an 82% chance on the markets right now to win. You've got Detroit, 81+% chance at home against Minnesota. Baltimore's at Miami. They've got an 81% chance. We'll see if Miami could pull off a second upset. We should get that line is indicating that Lamar Jackson will be back. We'll see. He should be back to play this week. So those are your biggest favorites on the board. Like I said, the concentration of picks really here on Rams, Chargers, and then Green Bay. Rams, of course, a lot of people still have left because there hasn't been any opportunities to take the Rams except for 1 week. That was that Thursday night game when San Francisco announced a bunch of injuries and San Francisco went on to win that game. So most people who took the Rams are out of your pool. So there's not too many people who don't have the opportunity to take the Rams in your pool this week. So that in and of itself is going to garner a lot more attention here for the Rams with the highest spread of the week. I want to move this to 35%. And it really doesn't change things. Now, why did I move it to 35 and not 50? I mean, I could show you what 50 looks like as well. But as we get deeper into the season, I just don't, even if the pool is of the same size as maybe in week 2 or 3, I still don't want to use future value weight as heavily. And for those new, just look, this is not the end all be all spreadsheet in the world, but it just kind of helps me with my logic and my thinking to be able to see it on the screen. So future value weight here is 35%. I tend to do 50% for what I call a moderately sized pool. I consider a moderate pool something that is almost guaranteed to get to week 18. But if we do get to week 18, there shouldn't be too many people left. And there's a possibility that maybe the pool will end prior to week 18. So currently in the pool, my buddy's pool that I'm in, there's 91 people left in that pool. There is a chance, if you get a Rams, certainly a week like this and the Rams lose, and we knock out half of those people, there's a chance that maybe you don't get to week 18. So that I would consider that pool to be in the moderate range. When we started with 1,320, I was looking at that more as a large pool, and I was looking at 100. So we're going to change. Your pool is not going to stay the same on how you think about it because we're going to have less weeks to go, and you're going to have less people in your pool each and every week. So I know a lot of you who are still alive here, we lost so many people last week. You may have been looking at when I do 100% on this spreadsheet, and now you're down to 35% because you lost so many people in your pool. So this is what it looks like here at 35%. Hasn't really changed much, right? Because we've got such massive favorites here with the Rams and Green Bay. So they're giving those as the top two options to look at when we don't weight it all that much. If we move this to 50, which is what we normally look at, this is where now it shifts to the Chargers, right? So there's no exact science behind this. You're going to have to kind of look at your own pool and determine which way you want to go. But Chargers, obviously, with less future value here than Green Bay, and certainly the Rams, and that's why they'll trigger at the 50% level. If we look at this at 75%, same two teams, right? And then the third team is the Rams. So not a lot is changing. It's an odd week here. If we go up to 100, that may change it a little bit, and it does. When we go to 100, now it's fully weighting in future value, and it's going to look for a team, really the team that has the best probability of winning and also has just really no future value. That's Chicago this week, but only a 59% chance to win. Now, some people may get on Chicago. This is an odd week where we just don't have that team. Cincinnati would have been that team last week. Of course, they lost. That team where they have no future value, but they're playing such a bad team that they do have enough of a chance, win probability to win, where a lot of people are going to gravitate to them. This is an odd week where you've just got these 5 teams that all have an 80+% chance to win, and the concentration of picks are all going there. So let's head over to Survivor Grid. We'll get a better feel for some of the future games here for these teams and hopefully help you guys decide on which way you want to go with your pick. All right. So Rams, I've got this sorted here by win probability or the spread at least. Rams, do we have any other opportunities to take the Rams this year? Now we saw they have a decent amount of future value, but you've really got to you look at the spreadsheet, it takes the totality of the lines that are projected for the rest of the year. But if you have a situation like the Rams here where they're pretty much favored in every game, at least projection-wise, but not a dominant favorite outside of a couple of weeks, right? So you that's why you really want to zone in and hone in on survivorgrid.com. Now, survivorgrid.com is not always going to have the most accurate lines for the future. You're going to have to use a little bit of your knowledge about football and where you think these lines are going to be. But it is a very good guide. So as we see at San Francisco for the Rams, they already lost this game at home, of course, a couple of weeks ago to San Francisco. It doesn't look like the greatest of spots, but a favorite. Hosting Seattle. Seattle's been very good this year, not the best of spots. Tampa at home. Tampa's played well, right? At Carolina looks like the next opportunity you'd want to use the Rams. Maybe not Arizona. At Arizona, home for Detroit, it's a tough one. At Seattle's a tough game. At Atlanta. And then week 18, home for Arizona. I've told you guys in the past, let's be careful about week 18 saying, I'm going to take the Rams in week 18. You don't know if the Rams are going to have a playoff spot locked up by the time week 18 rolls around, and now they're not playing any of their starters. And a game where we projected the Rams to be a heavy favorite, they're now maybe a 1-point favorite, or they're even an underdog in some situations. So I really don't look too closely at week 18, certainly not when I'm in week 9 of the season. So really, when we look at the Rams, do they have any future value? They do, but it's really concentrated on this week 13 game at Carolina. Now, what else do we have in week 13? Well, interestingly enough, the Chargers, who are a popular pick this week, are also in a pretty good spot at home against Vegas in week 13. While we're on the Chargers, I mean, is there anything else here that we're going to like with the Chargers? They're home to Pittsburgh next week, at Jacksonville, home for Philly, at Kansas City, at Dallas, home for Houston, at Denver. Similar situation here. I mean, it's almost identical outside of the fact that they don't have a strong potential week 18 matchup. But the Chargers, good matchup this week, good matchup in week 13, similar to the Rams. Not many other weeks that we're really going to want to take them. So they're sort of interchangeable here, and that could be important to your thinking on how you pick, because perhaps you want to get off of the 50+% Rams being picked in your pool and get yourself on the Chargers, still highly picked, not quite as high as the Rams are going to be picked. And then you'll be able to flip. You'll go against where the majority of the market is going if you can make it to week 13. So it's not a bad strategy there from that standpoint. And I think the way I'm thinking right now in my DraftKings one for the $1 million, and we've got a lot of entries in that one as far as the remaining, I'm thinking I'll probably do one of each. So I have 2 entries. As of right now, that's my thinking, right? So you can't ever hold me to this because come Sunday, like I said, things change. But I think the Rams and the Chargers, for me, I'm probably going to split those up because I do want to be able to at least have 2 different routes. If I take both on the Rams, which was my initial thought, I'm kind of stuck on the same path here when I get to week 13. I'm going to have to take the Chargers. So if I split them up and I get one of these games, there's 4 games potentially here that we're talking about, right? The 2 Ram games, 2 Charger games. If we get 1 or 2 of those games to be an upset, I'm kind of hedged there. I've got both sides of it, and we're hoping that, you know, if it's going to happen, it happens this week and you knock the Rams out. If that's your strategy, you're going to knock a whole lot of people out of your pool if the Saints can pull off that kind of an upset. All right. Let's look at the other team that is fairly popular, getting over 10%, and a big, strong favorite here. That's Green Bay. Now, Green Bay hosting Carolina, obviously a good spot this week. They've got more games here that we're going to potentially be taking them than the Rams and the Chargers. And we saw the Rams on my spreadsheet are showing as a better future value team, but you've got to look a little closer, like I said, at the Giants. Not terrible in week 11. Do we have to have them in week 11? Do we have other choices? That's what you have to look at. Have you taken Houston? I believe I have, actually, in every one of my picks that I have remaining. I think I have taken Houston, all of them, so I don't have Houston available. If you have Houston available, maybe you have, Houston at Tennessee as an option. Do you have Baltimore available? I do not in any of my picks. Baltimore in week 2 is a very popular pick. But if you do, perhaps you like them at Cleveland in week 11 with Lamar back. New England hosting the Jets looks like a pretty strong spot. If you have New England left, and I'm not sure how many New Englands I have probably in at least 2 of my 3, and I think all of my DraftKings ones. If you have New England left, this is obviously going to be a strong pick against the Jets. You've got Pittsburgh hosting Cincinnati as another possibility, right? So are we locked in? Do we have to take Green Bay in week 11? Probably not. You're probably going to have some other options. Well, week 12, they look pretty strong here as well. Green Bay, they're playing Minnesota. Baltimore, at some point here, you probably would have taken Baltimore by the time this rolls around. So maybe you won't have Baltimore left. They're hosting the Jets, obviously a strong game there. Detroit, you very easily could still have Detroit left, and they're at the Giants or hosting the Giants in week 12. That would be an option. Seattle at Tennessee. Perhaps you'd have Seattle still remaining. I know I've taken some Seattle already. Some of you may have as well. So, again, what I want you to do is just look at these weeks. Do I have other options? And why do I want to know that? At least for the immediate future. I always like to look, depending on the size of the pool, I just want to make sure I'm not handcuffing myself here, where if I go out on a limb and I take Green Bay, where not as many people are on Green Bay, and I'm doing it to sort of get away from the crowd, am I putting myself in a precarious position in the future? And not particularly, assuming you've got some of these options left to you and you have Green Bay as a choice this week. So, so keep that in mind here. If you do have Green Bay, you may have other outs here in the next few weeks to be able to take. The next biggest one will be hosting Chicago in week 14. Buffalo, you may have taken. Tampa's hosting New Orleans. Very good chance you still have Tampa remaining by the time that pick comes around. Detroit, we shall see. They've got a couple of good opportunities here. Denver at Vegas. You probably would have taken Denver by then, but we will see. All right, so I'm not as concerned, though, with week 14. I really want to make sure, especially the smaller the pool is, about week 12 is as far as I really want to worry about. I'm not going to worry about not having a pick here in week 14, because if things break right, I may have won the pool, or I may be in a situation where I'm going to be in a good hedge spot. And a lot of you guys, I told you with the hedging, this week we don't really have it. We don't have a good primetime game on Sunday night or the Monday night game in order to have like the last game on the schedule be a good hedge spot. But ideally, like I mentioned, the later the game, if that's your tiebreaker, the later the game in the week or the day, the more information you're going to have. Think about if you had Kansas City as a possibility. Now, of course, the Colts were the most popular pick, but let's assume the Colts had lost, and now you were sitting with Kansas City as the only person left in your pool on Monday night. A great hedge opportunity would have arisen, because you now know you're either going to win this entire pool or you're going to lose the game. And usually in most pools, if you lose and everyone else loses, they kind of bring everybody back for the following week. So you know exactly where you stand, which makes hedging a whole lot easier. The tricky part of hedging, especially the earlier in the season, is there's just too many variables, and you can get yourself in a situation where you're hedging every week, and now you're actually losing money when we're trying to win money on a hedge. So I told you I do like hedging on the point spread, because that does give me an opportunity to catch a middle. So if I did have Green Bay and I wanted to hedge this game and they're a 13-point favorite, I would bet Carolina plus the 13 points, hope that game stays within 13 and Green Bay wins. I can continue on in the pool, and I would hit my bet with Carolina plus the 13 points. So that's why I prefer that over the money line. But there are advantages to taking the money line as well. One of them being you can bet a whole lot smaller to still achieve the desired goal of what you are hoping to get back in a hedge. So the hedges get really, really tricky. I'm more than happy to kind of go over it with you guys in the comments. You guys know I get a ton of comments every week. Try and comment as early as you can in the week. Now, the tricky part is, of course, I want as much information. Like I said, I want to try to look right up to lock before I make my picks. But if you got some questions, if you're asking me an hour before the game start, there's a high likelihood I'm not going to see that. I get extremely busy between DFS, betting, fantasy, survivor pools on Sunday mornings. I do a show on Sunday mornings as well, so it gets really tricky for me to be able to stay on top of the comments, but I will do my best, of course. All right, so we looked at Green Bay's future here. You've got the Chargers and the Rams with a very similar future layout. Detroit, you're going to have a lot of options here with Detroit. Good matchup this week with Minnesota. Week 12, talked about that against the Giants. We looked at the entire Week 12. Week 14, again, that's a similar good spot potentially that Green Bay has there with Chicago. And again, I don't want to look too far out, but there's going to be some opportunities here to take Detroit, obviously one of the better teams in the league. And Baltimore's just got a very easy schedule. Unlikely that you do have Baltimore, but if you do, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to take Baltimore in the future. Let's look at this one other team here with New England, has a 70+% chance to win. You're probably not taking them this week. Like I said, that week 11 looks very good. Home against the Jets. They're home against the Giants in week 13. You're going to have some opportunities there. All right. So let me get back to the spreadsheet. I don't think we even need to look at the spreadsheet, but let's look at it anyway. We'll look at the spreadsheet because you don't want to see me in full view. You'd rather look at the spreadsheet with a small me. All right. You're in a small pool. I want to focus. I know a lot of people say, well, you're focusing a lot on the pools that are smaller. And I think we kind of looked at those of you in larger pools here. You get a good idea of what we're looking at. Those pools that are guaranteed to get to week 18. Obviously you're going to have to take in those pools some teams that most weeks you're gonna need at least 18 people. Some of you are in double pick pools. My pool's double pick as well. I think starts week 12 and 13. We had one double pick week earlier in the year. But if it's a single pick per week type of pool, you're gonna have to get 18 teams. I mean, essentially, you're going to want the top 18 teams, but if you could sneak a pick in with a team that's not a top 18 team in the league, of course, that's advantageous. We just don't have that situation, as I talked about earlier. Chicago's the closest thing you're going to have to it. I don't know the advantage here of getting on a Bears team in this spot when we've got so many other teams with a high likelihood to win, and you can get the same. I get this question. Someone asked me about San Francisco last week. They wanted to take San Francisco, presumably because a lot of people wouldn't be on San Francisco. Well, there's a reason a lot of people wouldn't be on San Francisco, and that's because they were an underdog in the game. You guys should not be looking at underdogs or even very slight favorites in games until you just absolutely have no other choice. You just don't have options, and you're kind of forced to pick a 3-point favorite in a game, and that may happen as we get deeper into the year. But if your objective is, and guys, I will ask you this question in the comments, and I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. If you ask me a question and I return a question back to you and I say, well, what is your thinking, or why are you thinking that? One, I may agree with your pick, but I want to know why you're thinking that pick in your particular situation, in your spot, in your pool, or I disagree with it, but I also want to hear what your logic is, right? I want you to articulate to me why it is that you think that's a good pick. So in the example of San Francisco last week, I just want you to articulate what you're thinking. And if you tell me, well, not a lot of people are going to be on the San Francisco pick, and I think they're going to win, I think they're going to be right. I really don't care. You guys know, I don't care what you think is going to happen in the game. You are not going to outpick the market, right? I do this for a living. I only have a very slight edge at picking over the market. And quite frankly, this year, just on the spreads, it's been my worst season picking against the point spread this year. I'm still doing well with the props, and I think I mentioned it on the show before. The prop market is soft, and you can find edges in prop market. It's very, very difficult in the NFL to have a strong edge because the market is so liquid. And that's why I tell you guys, read the book Wisdom of the Crowd. You'll understand that logic, and hopefully some of you guys read it. It's a great book. Super Forecasting as well, I've suggested to some people on here, is another very good book to read. Not necessarily, neither one of them have are exactly about sports betting, but I like the mindset to get you guys in. If you're interested in this stuff at all, really good book to read. All right, so um, I want to understand what your thinking is, and are you taking San Francisco presumably last week because no one else is taking them? Well, I basically achieved the same thing you did by taking Kansas City with one of my picks, and with my other pick in taking Philadelphia. I had very few people on those picks with me, and I had and in both cases I had teams that had a high likelihood of winning. Now, of course, I'm sacrificing some where Philly and Kansas City are going to have better matchups as the season goes on. I get that. That's the sacrifice you're making. But I feel much better about having made those picks than if I would have taken San Francisco and lost. I can always try and come up with a smart pick later in the season, even if it is a 3 or 4 point favorite, where I gave up the opportunity to take a better favorite or a weaker team in this week, and then that team winds up losing. So I'd rather look to there's a chance in the future with injuries that a team that we're not looking at is going to emerge. So when in doubt, take the better team. Take the team with the higher likelihood of winning. For those of you in really small pools, you may be getting down to a point where you can win. I know someone messaged me, they only had 3 people left in the pool. This is where we look at the threshold column. Now, this is based on what is being shown in Survivor Grid right now as pick percentage. But as you get into smaller pools, you look at the Grandissimo over at Circa, the majority of the people have been, in the last few weeks, have been really all on the biggest favorite. Now, 30%-ish of people in overall pools took the Colts last week, but 9 out of 15 over in that Grandissimo pool took the Colts, right? And that's been a trend. Why? There's not that many people left. They tend to be a little bit sharper, and they're going to stick with the safer pick, right? Most people in your pool are going to try to stick with the safer pick as well. So you'll see, you get down to 10 people, you may get a lot more Rams than this 50%. Now, what is this 50%? What's the threshold saying? Well, at 52.8%, right? Let's just round it off. There's 50%. You're basically going to need an 81% or better team in order to justify you not taking the Rams. So if you're in a pool with 10 people, you think 5 at least will be on the Rams, you're justified now to get off the Rams and take Green Bay and or the Chargers, or even Detroit, right? And it's not a hard, fast rule. I mean, if you wanted to really get all the way down to Baltimore, right, we're talking about percentages. This is not an exact science. But you could really justify taking any of these teams if you think 50% of your pool. Why? Because if 5 people are in or more out of your 10, we want that leverage where now we increase our chances. I mentioned this to you before. Think of it on the extremes. If you started with 1,000 people in your pool and the Rams, let's say, were the biggest favorite and there was only sub 60% favorites other than the Rams this week, right? And you had 1,000 people in your pool. Well, if 99.9% of them were taking the Rams, well, what this is telling you is you can basically take any other team, right? And be justified. Now, if you actually knew that, that information, right, it should be obvious to you that taking any other team is going to be an advantage, because if the Rams were to lose, you're going to win the pool right there. You had a 1 in 1,000 chance of winning your pool, and now you've got a much better chance than that. You'd have, let's say, a 10% chance that they lose their game, and let's say you were able to take the best team you could possibly take is a 60% chance of winning. You'd have a 10% multiplied by 60% chance that you'd win your pool. You'd have a 6% chance to win your pool. And to be able to do that, and put yourself in a position where at 6%, you probably aren't even in, you've been playing this pool now. If you started with 1,000 people, you don't have a 6% chance in all likelihood to win your pool. I started with 1,320 people in my pool. I've got 3 entries left. I started with 30. I've got 3 left. I've got 10% of my original entry. We're less than 10% of the pool that started left, so I'm ahead in equity, but I still don't have a 6% chance. I basically got a little bit better than 3% chance, right, to win this pool. So this should make obvious sense to you. And we had, I forget what it was. What do we have? 52.8 right now. But if you think now 70% right? That's just going to drop this number even more. It brings New England into play. All right, so let's just put it back where we had it. You're in this situation this week, and I've suggested this last week to a lot of people, where you were in a small amount. There was a small amount of people left in their pool. They didn't want to take the Colts because a lot of people were going to be on the Colts. But we saw that there was a lot. There were going to be a lot of people on the Falcons. There were going to be a decent amount of people on Cincinnati. And last week was a week where I thought maybe just getting on the chalk, because they were 91, 92% chance to win. You really had to have a very high percentage of people in your pool taking the Colts in order to justify getting off the Colts. So in most situations, I was suggesting just go ahead and take the Colts. There's probably not going to be enough people in your pool. And certainly, like when you got to the pool, my size, 150 people or so, with 30% people on it, even though, yes, it's a large chunk, they were such a high favorite. I don't mind getting on that, right? It's not always about just getting off the team that everyone's going to pick. You have to weigh the fact that we've got a strong win probability, and what are the other team? What are the probabilities of the other teams that week in the pool? So I didn't mind taking the Colts there. But when you are going to fade a team, let's not fade to the Chargers, right? If you're in a pool with 5 people left and you think 4 are going to take the Rams, or let's say there's 6 people left, 4 of your opponents are going to take the Rams, right? Well, now you defeat the purpose if you take the Chargers and that other person takes the Chargers, right? You now taken a slightly riskier pick, and you're on the same pick that someone else took. Now, while, yes, it's still a good spot to be in, if the Rams were to lose, you've got leverage. We want to try to figure out, can we get on a team that we're the only ones on and potentially win this pool? We've got to get ourselves in as many situations where we can win the pool as possible. Even with 10 people left, you've only got a 10% chance of winning your pool if you got one of those entries, right? So you're still a huge underdog to win. You're a big underdog if there's 5 people left in the pool, right? And until you get down to 2 people, then you're a 50-50 shot to win. I know it feels like, because you started with so many people in your pool, it feels like, hey, we're in such a good situation here. And you are. It's enviable. You want to get down to that final 10, final 5, but you're still a dog to win. So if we can get ourselves in a situation where we can win the pool this week, we got to take those shots, right? So we're going to forego a lot of maybe future value. You'd want to maybe take a Green Bay. You're like, well, a lot of people are looking at the future of Green Bay. Maybe even take a Detroit, where it's almost guaranteed no one's going to be on Detroit in your pool, right? You're taking a shot. Yes, I'm giving something up in the future for sure, but I'm taking a shot this week. Now, this may not be the week you want to do it, right? Because we have such a massive favorite here this week. With a 90% favorite, maybe you say, you know what, let me just kind of, I'll go along with the crowd here, hope I can advance, and I'll pick my spot. I think there might be a better spot in the future in order to pull this kind of a move, right? But you're going to have to do it at some point. If it's not this week, in the previous couple of weeks, there was opportunities to do that. Not as much last week, but I want you guys to keep that in mind. If you're going to get off of what is the chalkiest pick, and the threshold column is justifying it for you, well, you don't have to go to the next best pick, because I don't want to be sharing that pick with other people, right? Let me just take a Green Bay. Let me take a Detroit and hope I'm the only one on that team. And now I'm in a situation where if things break unbelievably right for me, I can actually win this pool. Or if it breaks partially right and we get maybe 7 out of the 10 and the other 3 of us advance, okay, still picked up a ton of equity in my pool, right? So that's what I want you guys thinking about. I want you thinking about hedging at this point in your pool. And we're getting down to a lot of these pools to the nitty gritty. So, all right, this is one of the longer ones. I didn't think I'd have a long one today because it seems pretty straightforward. There's only 3 teams that most people are taking, but I wanted to get into some of these other topics with you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys make it back next week. I love hearing your comments down below, so keep those coming. And hey, let's make it to week 10. If not, let's actually take this pool down in week 9, some of you who are in that situation. All right, guys, look forward to seeing you all next week, and good luck.